after he dropped it in the courtroom. I mean, they took what I thought was going to be a magical moment for the defense and destroyed him. I mean, destroyed him there, didn't he?
I had no idea that this was coming in the case, and that's because we've spent so much time going over all of the arguments that happened in the pretrial litigation before this ever becomes a case in the courtroom. This was a moment that the state did not show their hand on, waiting for this moment in the defense's case when they bring up the white dot, which we saw in filings many months ago, and now using this video in the cup food to give an alternate theory. But I don't know how the defense would have anticipated us than going through the hours of video that exist in this case and figuring out if there was ever a time that George Floyd had something white in his mouth.
Right. That may have been one of those situations where maybe the defense should have kept that in their own pocket and brought it out at trial and then maybe scrambling. But they didn't, and you had a moment. Wow. All right, Julie Jeanette, we'll talk to you in just a little bit. Let's bring in our think tank tonight. Joining us in Los Angeles, California, former federal prosecutor Nima Romani, in Tampa, Florida, criminal defense attorney Pizzeria To Go, and in West Palm Beach, Florida, the state attorney from Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Arenberg is with us. All right, great to have everyone back. Nima, generally speaking, prosecutors aren't known for their cross-examination, and quite honestly, Barry Blackwell's not a prosecutor. That's not what he does. He's a special prosecutor in this case. But that was taking a moment. I talked about this months ago, and it seemed like it would be a great moment in front of a jury for the defense, but it ended up not being so great. At least that's what I thought. What did you think?
I love Blackwell in this case. From his opening statement to his cross-examination of Dr. Fowler, I think he's been the most effective witness, even though he is a civil attorney. He's here to spend
The thing with that is,
on the Attorney General.
from acid tablets, when people take acid, they stick it on the end of their tongue and then so it doesn't get ingested all at one time. So it's slow.
The white substance, which is clear that he's suggesting that it was chewing gum, but also the statement that he elicited from Dr. Fowler that even if George Floyd was suffering from heart disease or cardiac arrest, it was incumbent upon Derek Chauvin to render aid. And he really touched upon those last minutes, the last 4 or 5 minutes particularly. And I thought that was highly, highly effective, outstanding cross-examination by Blackwell today.
Teresa Jean-Pierre Coy, criminal defense attorneys like you get to do a lot of cross-examinations, so you guys are really good at it. Prosecutors don't do quite as much, but again, this wasn't a prosecutor, but that was a moment, they must have just been like drooling the whole trial, waiting for when is the defense going to bring this out, because they have no idea what they're going to do.
And as I'm sitting as a defense attorney, when that cross-examination was going on, my heart is dropping. So when Blackwell brought that out, I thought it was fantastic. I mean, they did a really good job. It was a drop the mic moment. And I agree. I think the defense probably should have saved that argument and maybe argued closing arguments by using the video and making that argument then. But doing it in this, with the direct discomfort and the way that Blackwell just eviscerated him, yeah, that was tough to watch.
Dave Arenberg, what do you think the jury takes away from it? You think there's going to be their own investigating of the little white dot and their own debate, or do you think this issue was won today by the prosecution or the defense?
It was won by the prosecution, Vinny. I think the jury will probably put this aside and look to other issues like causation. But when it comes to this particular issue of the white dot, I think that part that relates to causation is off to the side forever now. And I was wondering when I saw it, why the prosecutors didn't try to take the sting out of it by bringing it up themselves. Usually when you know something damaging is going to come out, and Vinny, you saw this early on. So why did the prosecutors bring it out early? Well, I found out why. Because they were waiting. It was a trap, and they had that mic drop moment. It reminded me, not to get political, but during a debate between Obama and Romney.
You're getting political.
Well, no, just one thing. Obama said to Romney, proceed, Governor. And that to me was what the prosecution did today. Proceed, and they stepped into a landmine.
All right. Now, you mentioned cause of death. Let's take a listen to what Dr. David Fowler said about that today.
Did you form ultimately opinions as to the cause and manner of death of Mr. Floyd?
Yes.
And what would those conclusions be?
Mr. Floyd died of a
cardiac arrhythmia due to hypertensive atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease during the restraint.
And were there contributing causes?
Yes.
What are those?
The substances, the fentanyl and the methamphetamine, the potential of a carbon monoxide role, and the potential of the paraganglionoma was adding adrenaline to this whole mixture, making things even worse.
All right, he also opined on manner of death, and his conclusion was undetermined. There's so much going on that he could not, as a forensic pathologist, come up with a final determination. So, Teresa Jean-Pierre Coy, do you think that makes him more credible or less credible? You know, coming in and saying, listen, there's so much going on, I can't tell you for sure the exact manner of death because it could have been this, it could have been that, versus the prosecution expert who said, oh no, it's definitely homicide and it's definitely this.
I think it makes him more credible, and as Dave said earlier, I think he was the best witness for the defense because, you know, the fact is, there were drugs found in Floyd's system. You know, there was a car there was some, you know, direct and cross-examination about that issue. There were some other issues going on there, so I think those things did make him a more credible witness. And remember, the defense doesn't have the burden here. The defense is just really trying to feel